Hello everyone. Today I will be talking to you about the Kids Cookbook collection that is at the Kawartha Lakes Public Library. Just to give you a quick background on the Kawartha Lakes, it's about an hour and a half northeast of Toronto. It's a big geographical area and there's lots of little towns associated with it. There's about 75,000 people that live there regularly. So quick agenda for this presentation. I'm just going to quickly introduce you to kids' cookbooks, talk about the evaluation methods that I used for the collection, the major findings, my selection and deselection processes, and then any challenges and surprises that I came across. So a quick introduction to kids' cookbooks. The culture of food really emerged in the Middle Ages. Cookbooks have really developed from quick, simple notes to very detailed recipes with directions and pictures, and that's how the idea of cookbooks developed. They can take on many different themes, which we'll talk about when I talk about some of the themes that I found in this collection. They can either be written with the intention of children being the audience for kids' cookbooks, or with guardians being the audience, making food for or with their children. As far as users go, any child or teenager can benefit from these books. Really anyone who would enjoy cooking or learning something new in the kitchen. There are tons of benefits that are outlined by Statistics Canada, such as learning to read, learning measurements, encouraging healthy eating, creativity, and innovation. So when I evaluated the collection at the Kawartha Lakes Public Library, I looked at a few things, such as size, usage, and currency. For size, you can see by that pie chart that there are mostly print books and ebooks as well. So there were 83 books in total that were part of this collection, only one audiobook and one DVD. This does make sense when you think about what the collection is when it's cookbooks. It makes sense to have a lot of print books or ebooks so that there's great usability for these books. As far as usage goes, as you can see from that chart, there are a vast number of books that are in the library and only a couple that were unavailable because patrons are using them. Only 7 books were used in total, which is pretty shocking. And then for currency, most of the books that are in the collection were published in between 2006 and 2014. So this is something that I looked at later on for deselection, considering which ones perhaps maybe no longer useful or relevant. So major findings when I was just quickly looking through the collection, that the majority of the collection was in print. Again, it makes sense when you consider the audience in use. There were very few books about culture. In fact, there was nothing about the Japanese culture. The town of Lindsay, which is part of the city of Kawartha Lakes, has a sister city in Japan. They do a lot of exchanges and whatnot. So I thought that the Japanese culture would be reflected in the cookbooks, and unfortunately it was not. There were very few books about dietary restrictions, such as lactose intolerance or gluten-free and things like that. And there are very few duplicate books. So the Kawartha Lakes really promotes this idea of one collection and 14 branches. So they want to have books being circulated between all the branches, so they don't have very many books. They don't have duplicates at each branch. They'd rather share them all. The collection as a whole, unfortunately, was very underused. So now the selection process, when I was actually trying to choose new books to add to the collection. I looked at 4 different things: cultural materials, dietary materials, celebrity materials, and local materials. And the great thing is that the Kawartha Lakes Public Library has a great collection development policy already developed, so a lot of the ideas are developed from that. So when I thought about culture, a lot more international books should be added to the collection. This would fit the school curriculum that the library should reflect. And overall, children can expand their knowledge about food and culture, again, especially Japanese culture. For dietary restrictions, kids could have dietary restrictions for a variety of reasons, such as health concerns or by choice. And then the children should be encouraged to cook and eat food, even though they have these restrictions. So cooking can be fun and exciting for them. For celebrity materials, I looked at getting books or acquiring books that had celebrity chefs from the Food Network, or even I considered sort of Disney princesses or Harry Potter and that sort of thing, because that'll get kids really excited about cooking. They're also really popular. And finally, local materials. This is a very close-knit community. So a lot of times you'll find schools or churches do sort of cookbook fundraisers, and having these in our library could really connect to the community. And but these will be hopefully acquired by donation, so they weren't actually selected through this process for the project. So when selecting, I also considered price, so the budget being $600, the shelf space that we have for the physical location in the library, the quality of the books, so maybe hardcover or softcover. I went with mostly hardcover books just because they're going to be used a lot and used in the kitchen, and then looking at the current collection. So for the deselection process, there were 3 things I looked at, and then of course there were some exceptions. So the first one was usage. So I looked at circulation statistics. So if something hadn't been circulated in the last 2 years, then it was going to be deselected from the current collection. Also publication date. So anything that was published from 2000 or before was no longer considered for the collection. It was weeded out accordingly. Quality and value. If there was content in some books that was maybe about 50% the same as another book in the collection, it was considered too similar, and so one of the books would have to be weeded. And then whether they were relevant and accurate. So for example, Canada's Food Guide is no longer what is being used. It's now called the Food Pyramid, so if books were about the food guide, then they would be weeded out accordingly. And finally, deterioration. This is especially important for cookbooks because they're used in the kitchen. They have lots of spills, lots of water or food on them, or stains, so they would have to get weeded out a lot as well. And of course, some exceptions. Ebooks had a whole different deselection process. If books were classics, they might be considered to stay in the collection. Canadian books, if they were used regularly, or if books were donated. Challenges and surprises. A challenge that I had was not having access to all the information. So for example, when I was looking at statistics for circulation, I unfortunately didn't have those. So I couldn't actually deselect books based on that. And then also adapting selection criteria to fit this collection. Since Kids Cookbooks is a fairly specific collection, there's not actually selection tools dedicated just to the development of cookbooks. And then the surprise, I was really thankful that the Kawartha Lakes Public Library had such a great collection development policy, and that really worked well for this project. And those are the references that I use to make this, and if you have any questions, please let me know, and I hope you enjoy this presentation.